Okay, bring up the mic. There we go. All right. I don't know if I need the mic, but at least he's got it on. I'm batting a little bit of a sore throat, so I think it helps a little bit. But my name is Robbie Dick. Welcome to Hadoop Summit. I guess this is the first breakout after the keynote. So again, I'm with BMC Software, and I've been there since '99. Almost every day, without exception, focusing on one topic, and it's not really big data or Hadoop topic. It is batch or workload automation. But so hopefully you're in the right room. Batch is back is the presentation, and I'm not here to fool anybody. I was in the speaker ready room for a little bit, and there was some detailed, heavy-duty Hadoop discussions going on about most of the things I'd heard of. Some of these uniquely named things, but many of them I don't know the details. I don't know the gory details of a Hadoop processing, so I'm not here to fool anybody. But since '99, almost every day, I have worked on what used to be called job scheduling or batch processing. More modern term is workload or workflow automation. And we have a solution. We're a commercial enterprise software company that has a number of solutions, but the one that really I'll deep dive as we get going here is on ControlEm, which is really an enterprise workload automation solution. But 3 years ago, we introduced support for Hadoop. And it's pretty significant and exciting what it brings, not just into the Hadoop environment, but into the environment that Hadoop plays in, all the other technologies that are so critical to your business and getting data, likely in most cases, into your Hadoop environment, and then what you do with the data when it comes out. There's a lot of technologies usually that are relied upon. So that's where we'll get going. So. Any Amy Winehouse fans in the room? I think she's got a song called the Blank is Back. That was one area that we thought maybe we'd play on that, or AC/DC Back in Black, like Back in Batch, or Vanilla Ice, Ice Ice Baby. We think Batch Batch Baby. Sometimes batch is considered like a old a four-letter term, or it's old. Like we took care of that 20 or 30 years ago. But it's critical to your business, and well, I see some of you shaking your head already, but that's really kind of where I want to start off. So if you have any questions as we go, please don't hesitate. I may defer you or tell you stop by booth 401. So BMC Software does have a pretty prominent booth right when you come into the main floor down a level. Look for the orange booth, step in and go to the right, and we've got really a couple product lines represented there: capacity and optimization, and then the workload automation line of business. But if you want to do a deep dive, stop by booth 401 at any point today or tomorrow. We'll be there when there's open. But so I may defer you to there because we've got the guy that wrote the book. So does everybody got the Hadoop workflows for dummies in front of you? Joe Goldberg is a colleague of mine. He's not here. He's man in the booth. He literally wrote the book on Hadoop workflow processing. You got it in front of you. So he'll be happy to autograph it for you when you come on down. It'll be worth at least a cent more than it's worth right now if Joe autographs it. In any case, let's get right to it. In the room, who would describe themselves as a developer if you were to just use a quick show of hands? And I know it's not scientific. How about like an engineer? So most of you developers. How about operators or schedulers? Would anybody describe themselves? Oh, wonderful. Okay, a couple, 2 or 3 of you. So here's just kind of a laundry list of topics that, again, BMC has been in the workload or workflow or job scheduling world for decades, right? And 3 years ago, we introduced Hadoop support. But look at that list of kind of characteristics or capabilities that almost everyone in the organization would say is important to them. Maybe an engineer might swizzle them a little bit differently than an operator or a scheduler, but the ability to create workflow elements, whether you're a Hadoop application developer, or maybe you're a database programmer, or maybe an engineer or an operator scheduler, right? The ability to create those jobs that are so critical to the business, pretty important. And you see 5 or 6 or 7 of what really it could be a list of 30 or 40 items that even though we just 3 years ago added a kind of our Hadoop support, we've done a lot of events like this and talked to a lot of our existing customers. ControlEm is used worldwide by enterprises that you've heard of every day, by about 3,000. It is the #1 market share workload automation solution across the globe. And so these aren't things we made up. This is what, when we talk to customers and prospects at events like this, or to our, when we go visit our customers, these are the capabilities they need, particularly in a Hadoop environment? No, but in every critical technology or application they have in the environment. Auditing and reporting, is that important to anyone in here? I mean, this is, it's a little bit of a rhetorical question. I mean, every day companies across the globe are on the front page of the paper for bad reasons because there's some sort of security or audit or compliance issue. And you know, we don't want to be there. So these are very important topics. Okay, I'll give you a second. Look at it. Who would say they use more than 5 of those technologies in their environment? Okay, a few of you. Okay, I'll give it another second because I see more hands going. How about 3 or more? So some of you already raised your hand. How about those that would be 3 or more? I would expect at least every one of you has at least 2 of these in the environment. You know, as every new technology comes out, and so I'll try to relate it to Hadoop or big data where specific, but that environment is changing more today than any other technology-related project or area today. And it's maybe changing on a more regular and frequent basis than any other technology thing in the last 20 years. It's just amazing how the tools and applications, whether they're open source or commercial or homegrown, are changing on a regular basis. And what does that do to you? Most of you described yourselves as developers. That means there's another new tool that you need to learn next week. Not just the Databricks jobs capability specifically, right? But the Hadoop parts of it, the big data parts of it, the parts where it works, maybe ingesting or outputting information on the back end. And I won't say every single one of these has kind of a workflow automation or workload automation component to it, but what you're doing in these environments is critical to the business in one way, shape, or form. Otherwise, you likely wouldn't be doing it. And even in today's environment, in a workload automation environment, or industry analysts estimate roughly 60 to 70% of processing is considered batch, or what used to be called batch, which is now workflow. So they all have kind of their built-in ways of sequencing, managing, and automating that critical processing. And what happens that when that list starts to grow as it does, your company needs to add more and more people, or you need to become much more rounded and capable and understand all of these technologies. But when you do, and that's great, don't get me wrong, it's not a bad thing, but that means you spend less time on what you get paid to do. Maybe develop Hadoop applications, or be an engineer if that's when you raised your hand, or operate and schedule if that's your primary role, as some of you said it was, right? It just creeps, and scope goes so wide it becomes very hard to manage the environment without being a bit of an expert in all of these, and that really takes away from what you do as your day job. A lot of things in a coding environment have changed in the last few years. Everything needs to be done faster in a more robust way. Are any of you using containers today? Were you 5 years ago? I mean, maybe you were, but NoSQL or Hadoop. I think Hadoop's existed now for 10 years, but really has become critical in the last few years. So lots of things are changing in this environment, but one thing that hasn't really changed over the years, at least if you consider the built-in solutions that these technologies have, is the way you manage the batch. You have all these different applications and technologies, and likely they all manage their batch components a different way, and likely with scripts that need to be written for all the various technologies. And that means that one person has to do 50 things, or what was one person now needs to be 10 people to manage the heavy, kind of onerous batch parts of those 10 different applications. And before I came to BMC in '99, I was a Unix administrator in the Midwest United States. At that time, I could write a script with the best of them, a shell script, a Bourne script, a Korn shell script, right? Those skills have kind of faded because I don't do that on a daily basis anymore. How many of you are comfortable developing a script? Right? Many of you probably are. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you're spending 30 to 50% of your time in the script on the sequencing and the managing and the workflow processing part, that's 30 or 50% of the time you're not spending on the business benefiting Hadoop parts of your developer life cycle or environment. So we have a solution. Quite honestly, this solution has existed since the mid-1980s and started on the mainframe. Anybody ever done mainframe programming or processing here? Okay, a few of you. My hairline says that I have as well. Even though I was a Unix administrator, I wasn't. I never was a mainframe processing guy, but this is where ControlEm started its life in the mid-1980s. But I started BMC in '99, and I've touched a mainframe, but I've never actually worked on it. But I have worked on the batch parts of mainframe because I know ControlEm. And what ControlEm is an enterprise workload automation solution, which supports today, as we sit, about 35 applications in a very robust way. And Hadoop, 3 years ago, was added to that list as one of those 35. So just give me a second here. And again, I'm doing a little bit of a deep dive now into some of the capabilities, and we'll look in a couple screens at the Hadoop specific capabilities. But this is an area where if you like what you hear, whether you want the autograph from Joe or not, come by the booth and we can do a deep dive demo or give you some, we have some additional collateral as well. But this is what the interface looks like for the ControlEm solution. Basically, I know because I'm somewhat familiar with this environment, but these could be Unix jobs that I have running. Maybe these are Hadoop jobs that are running in the environment. Maybe this is a mainframe job that's in between there. Some of them have lines indicating successor-predecessor relationship. So the success or failure of this job affects the actual invocation of this job, right? So 35 or so applications or technology ControlEm supports specifically. So if you were to double click on any one of those, if it were a Unix job, you would see some Unix specific parameters. If it were a Hadoop job, maybe you'd see some Hive or Scoop or Pig or Java MapReduce specific. So that's just some of the various capabilities that we support in a Hadoop environment. And on the left-hand side, which I've got a screen in a second, but this interface is an installed Windows-based interface. This is where you look at jobs as they run. One of the other domains, as we call them on the left-hand side, is where you would go to create the jobs in the environment. We also have a web-based interface called Workload Change Manager that we can demo down in the booth. If you're a Hadoop application developer, maybe you don't want to install our Windows application and go about it that way, but this is what our operations and scheduling teams use. But you could use Workload Change Manager's web-based interface to very quickly, and in a graphical way, create 20, 30, 300 Hadoop processing jobs in your environment that then would get run and could be monitored through a web-based interface or through the monitoring domain that we're looking at here. Another one of the other domains on the left-hand side is the ability to look at how these jobs ran yesterday or last week or last month. ControlEm can make a lot of problems in your workflow processing environment, whether it's Hadoop or any of those other technologies, go away. But it doesn't make all problems go away. There's still issues occasionally. So when there's an issue in today's environment for jobs that are running, and again, these could be my Hadoop, some of my Hadoop jobs, I have immediate access to the output and the log. Again, whether it's a Hadoop job or any of those other 35 or so technologies in the environment. So in a couple seconds I can see that, but you can use the history domain on the left-hand side to see, well, what happened yesterday when these jobs ran? Or maybe they didn't run yesterday, maybe they were last week or last month or last year. Within seconds, you have immediate access to that, both through the installed Windows-based interface that you see here, or through our ControlEm self-service interface or web-based interface as well. Another one of the domains is a forecast domain that lets me see how are these jobs, in what order are these jobs expected to run on a future day. And maybe I expect a week from now there's going to be a significant change in my Hadoop environment or in whatever environment I have that's going to cause an increase in my number of jobs, or I need 30% more time. So forecast lets you show immediately status or expected flow on that future day, and then in a few seconds you can say, and what if these 1,000 jobs take 30% longer than normal next Friday? And not only do you see the health and status and the details of each individual job through that forecasted view, but you also see it reported on at the business service level. So one of many areas where ControlEm differentiates itself from the competition, and things, and when I say competition, there's some industry, third-party, long-time workflow, workload automation solutions that we compete with, but even something like Oozie. Or, so are there any Oozie users in the room? So this is an area where if I get down into the weeds, I'll quickly show my ignorance, but are you using Hue in front of it? It's kind of a graphical representation, but we do some pretty amazing things, not just for the enterprise, but in comparison to competition like Oozie or Databricks Jobs or any of those other that you see here. So the ability to quickly say, 30%, is that going to make my Hadoop service that I'm working on that's critical to my business? Maybe it's some sort of customer loyalty program and it needs to be done by 6 a.m. on that day. Is that 30% going to make me violate 6 a.m.? Or yes or no? And through the forecast domain, you can see that estimate that 30% increased load and see its effect not at an individual job level only, but at my service level in a matter of seconds. So here's a little bit more detail, so hopefully you can start to see it. And again, if more details, booth 401, come on by. This is a quick view of that workload change manager interface. So the view that we had up till now was the installed Windows-based interface, but this was really kind of a purpose-built interface for application developers, whether you're Hadoop or SAP or BI or BA tools. Again, that list of about 35 or so that we support. If you're a developer, you want even a quicker, easier way to create jobs in your environment. And that's what this workload change manager interface provides here. Again, I realize you can't see the details, but there's the job palette. So if you do, how many of you in the room, that's a question I forgot to ask earlier, do Hadoop only? And I mean, that's okay, that's fine. But some of you, many of you probably do some Unix scripting or application development, or maybe in an ERP or in databases or in BI or BA tools or in Java or messaging or web services, right? So these are that's finally some of the other in that 35 that we support. You can use Workload Change Manager in the palette to drag down a Hive job or a Scoop or a Java MapReduce or a Spark job and maybe an SAP job and maybe an Oracle database job and maybe an SAP job. So those are 35 or so of the job types that are available from the palette that you drag down, and then you start to build the specific details of the job. Maybe the Hive script, or you point to a Hive script that you've written, or a Scoop script, or a Pig script. But you don't have to have any of the sequencing or workflow automation capabilities in that script. That's what ControlEm is there to take care of. Here's through the installed Windows-based interface what the Hadoop job type looks like. So here you can see this list. So when you grab down the execution type, there's we're up to about 10 or 12 kind of specific projects or job types that we support in a Hadoop environment. So I mentioned many of them: streaming, Tajo, DistCP, distributed copy are now capabilities that we support. Depending on the job type that's selected, the rest of that window will change to be specific to that technology. Okay? So most of you said you're not only dedicated to Hadoop, but here, if I were to look at the SAP job or a database job or a web service job or a Unix job or a Windows job, it would have a similar lookout or lay and feel, but the details would be specific to the application or the technology in question. And what's wonderful is the way you schedule it, the actions that need to occur before it, the alerts that you may want to happen automatically when a job fails because of a certain return code or because of certain text strings in the output. You can do that through those various sections right there for a Hadoop Scoop job, the exact same way you would do them for an SAP job or for a data stage job or an Informatica job, right? So we abstract that while we still give specific capabilities for the application or technology in question. The ability to do all that complex processing we do across the board the same way for any of our supported applications or operating systems. So not only can we forecast everything and look at history of everything and monitor everything through a web-based interface or through a web or a mobile device, we give you those complex capabilities, again, giving you specifics where needed, which every job type has its own specific details that it needs. But and we're supported, we document and officially support 5 of the Hadoop distributors, or the primary ones in the enterprise, so that you see them listed on the upper left-hand side there. A little bit more detail of what the Hadoop specific processing looks like in ControlEm. So on the left-hand side, somewhat similar to the screen that we just saw, but the one on the right, that was where you define the job. This is the details when you double-click in the Windows interface what the job looks like. So this is a scoop job. So the one we were looking at before, I think, had Java MapReduce highlighted, but here's a scoop job, and this one's already run in the environment. So there you see some details about it, and from the from the monitoring domain where we were at a second ago, a single click or a double click opens this up. You can see the details, and then a hyperlink there will take you to the specific, in this case, details of the scoop job or Java MapReduce job or whatever the job type is. And I mentioned it, I don't know if I showed a little bit earlier, that the top center there is what the web-based interface looks like. And again, I realize you can't see the details from here, but from where you're at, but come by the booth and you can get a demo of this as well. That's where maybe I've got that Hadoop service that I was talking about that's so critical to my business that needs to be done by 6 o'clock today. And I can see immediately, well, maybe you can tell me you can't. That's red, that's green. The red ones have a problem. So I could double click on that and see the 30 jobs or the 300 jobs that are associated to that service. And then assuming I have permission, I could rerun that job, look at its output through that web-based interface, look at its log, maybe make a one-time change to the job and rerun it again. Now, all of those are completely audited and generally managed by a ControlEm or a scheduling or an operations person in the environment. That doesn't have to be done that way, but think about ControlEm. We're used by about 3,000 companies worldwide. Started on the mainframe back in the mid-'80s. Oftentimes, or historically, there's infrastructure and operations teams that are dedicated in the environment to managing the workflows for all of those technologies, databases, their mainframe processing, their Unix, their Linux, their Windows. Now you add Hadoop in there just as another one. But if you don't have an infrastructure and operations team, I mean, don't misread or jump ahead to what I said there. That could be absolutely your role. Maybe you don't have an infrastructure and operations team. You're just using ControlEm to manage your Hadoop processing, and you're the one-stop shop. So you can fire up the web or the Windows-based interface. You can also access all these capabilities, or the majority of them, through a mobile device. So as long we have a mobile interface for our workload automation solution, supports iOS and Android. So basically, I won't say every capability that we have in the Windows-based interface is there. It's not, but it's purpose-built so you can quickly get in, do what you need to do as a developer or a non-heads-down user, and get out. Whether you're out taking the kids to school or having a round of golf on the weekend, whatever the case may be. So these are some of the capabilities that you have through a tablet or through a iOS or Android mobile device. Now, in the ControlEm environment, there's many capabilities that I haven't mentioned and won't unless you have questions or want to go into the details if you stop by the booth. But a pretty exciting one that's very relevant to Hadoop processing because of that constant amount of change and new applications and technologies are getting involved in the Hadoop world is what we call Application Integrator. We introduced it to actually, I think April 2nd, it was a year old. So basically, it's a web-based interface that lets you create a specific job in ControlEm for an application that we don't have a specific application integration for already. So I keep saying 35. That's about how many applications we have a specific job type for, Hadoop being one of them. But there's hundreds or thousands of applications that you have in your environment that we don't have a specific job type for. Doesn't mean we can't run jobs in it. We likely, almost assuredly, can do so. As long as you have a command line interface or an API or it has this functionality exposed as a web service, ControlEm can schedule jobs in those environments. But Sometimes you want a little bit more robust interface than that. That's what Application Integrator is for. So if you can go out to the www.bmc.com/hub right now and see a list of about 15 job types. Here you just see a couple of them, Micro Focus and Lawson, where as long as you have an application that has capability exposed in a web service, command line interface, or a REST API, you can write your own ControlEm interface. And then if you'd like, you can make that available to the hub for the 3,000 other ControlEm customers in the world to go grab that down and use that, in this case, Lawson interface in their environment. So we got a great development team. They do some amazing work, but they can't make an application integration for every application that's important. We hit the big ones, right? We hit Hadoop 3 years ago, and I mentioned many of the other ones today, but there's still hundreds or thousands more. And that could be a homegrown application you have. If it's critical to the business and part of some overall flow or workflow automation that you have, you can do it with a script, or you can use Application Integrator to build a custom form very quickly that has meaning to that application and how you manage its workflows through ControlEm. So it's pretty exciting. So we're up to about 15 or 20 now application job types in that. As every year goes by, we expect there to be more and more. And quite honestly, many customers are developing applications and just not making it publicly available on the hub either. That's fine too, but if you've got an application and you write an interface for it, we'd like you to put it into the hub, and then it's available for other ControlEm customers to consume and use as they see fit. Okay, just a couple more items, and we've got just a few more minutes. Again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate, or again, make sure to come by 401, get a signature from Joe. Here's some other fairly common titles of people that are involved with workflow or workload automation in the organization on the left-hand side. I've talked about a couple of them already and a little bit of this capability already, but there really is quite a bit more to it than that. So here's the monitoring domain. We saw that one earlier. Maybe that's traditionally the role of an operator to watch, no matter what the underlying architecture is, the critical workflow parts of processing. They do that through the monitoring domain or the history domain. Here's that forecast domain. So I mentioned it earlier, but here's an actual view of it. And you should see a theme that no matter what domain you're in, everything basically looks and feels the same, and that's by design. So whether this is entirely some Java MapReduce job flow, or maybe it's mixed in with some database processing at the beginning and then some scoop to get my data in my environment, and then the Hadoop processing, it operates the same way across the enterprise. The planning domain is one that I didn't really highlight earlier. I might have mentioned it. This is where you would go if you were a creator of new jobs in the environment. So you can do that through the Windows-based interface or through that workload change manager component that I mentioned earlier. So here, again, I don't know if you can see the details. This is a file. So one of those 35 job types is a file transfer job. You probably are moving lots of files around inside your Hadoop environment, and we support that, or outside the Hadoop environment before it gets in or after the data comes out of your Hadoop environment. So this is a file transfer job. It's moving a file or a set of files from one host to another. There you can see a synopsis of it, but a double click on it will show you the details of that in the planning domain, which again, historically is maybe where a scheduler would go. But as every day goes by, this is now the domain of developers or business users, line of business folks in the environment. It's completely changed compared to just a few years ago.
How are these workflows represented, addressed? Are they in the database, or is it just a big JSON protocol or whatever?
Yeah, so today, basically, once these are pushed into the environment, they exist in the ControlEm SQL database that's used, so Oracle or Sybase or Postgres or MS SQL. So ultimately, the ControlEm architecture is a 3-tier architecture with an underlying database that supports it. But you can export it out into XML today, and literally the next release from our lab is the ability, what we're calling the automation API. It's really specific to Hadoop application developers so they can get their jobs into in and out via JSON. So that's one. So we're not there right this second, but literally in the next 60 days max, we'll be there with what we're calling the automation API.
Do you support templates? So for us, we have like 90% of our workflows look the same. They do different things, different high queries, but they do the same actions basically.
Correct.
So we move like a template or a wizard basically.
No problem. So the question was, do you support templates? We actually do. That's what we call them. So you have a job template that we provide a few default, but then you can make your own as custom it needs to be. And then when you create jobs, they're going to be 98% the same for those 300 jobs. You just need to change 1 or 2 parameters per each. You'd make the template accordingly and then say, give me 300 jobs based on template A, B, C, X, Y, Z, whatever. And now you only have to change 1 thing on each job as opposed to the 30 things that are needed. Absolutely. So, and this is an area, we don't just do that for Hadoop. We do that for anything of any of those 35, of which I've mentioned some, or anything that has a command line interface or supports a script to initiate or to run its processing. So that, to kind of tie it back to the beginning, that's what we mean when we say a true enterprise workload automation solution that really is number 1 by market share. It's number 1 in most industry analysts from a capability, functionality, and vision for the future standpoint. And not to leave out, I don't think I asked earlier if anybody in the room would consider themselves an administrator, but some of our ControlEm environments run 3 million jobs a day across some pretty substantial enterprises. Some that are probably in the room or that use ControlEm, or companies that some of the biggest in the world that you've heard of. So we have some companies, some of our 3,000 run 50 or 100 jobs a day, maybe in a particular application or line of business. But so no matter what the environment looks like, we also provide kind of an infrastructure view. So these aren't jobs that are running in my environment. This is a view of the ControlEm infrastructure that is used to run. So some of our larger environments, there would be thousands of machines involved in their workload processing across the enterprise, from the biggest mainframes in the world to the smallest virtual machine. So that's 3 of the 35 that I don't think I mentioned. So we support VMware as a job type, Amazon EC2, and BMC Blade Logic as well. No matter the environment, whether it's 1 machine or literally tens of thousands of machines, there's also a view that a ControlEm administrator or a workflow administrator can immediately see state and status. Are all my machines available from a workload standpoint and doing and available as they need to be. So that's what we call our infrastructure view. And then I talked enough about self-service. That's a little bit more exploded view of it there. But again, if I'm a Hadoop application developer and there's 10 services that I should have access to, I would see only those 10 here. Maybe I also have loads of other jobs running in my ControlEm environment, but in my Unix platform, maybe in my databases, ERPs, maybe things that you have other teams at your company that are responsible for. If you don't have permission, you wouldn't see them here, but you would see what you're authorized to see and have basically 1 or 2 clicks away from how did they run yesterday, how are they going to run in the future, what's the issue with the run today through the web-based interface. So really, just as a close, and I mentioned ControlEm is used by about 3,000 customers worldwide. There's just a few that you see up here on the list that use it really to run their enterprise. And I said at the beginning, I'm not here to trick anybody, obviously, into, I'm not a Hadoop guy through and through, but we've done a number of Hadoop-related events in the last few years, and I've been doing ControlEm every day since '99. I've never given so many like 30-second or 60-second demos to a group of users that says, oh, I had no idea something like that existed for managing my Hadoop workflow processing. We know we have Uzi, Hue, and jobs, and every week it seems like there's another one in the environment, but this is what we mean by batch is back. It never really went anywhere, quite honestly, but it's not the darling of the media like Hadoop is. And I don't mean that negatively. I mean, Hadoop's an amazing thing. But for us, we do provide robust support for the technology, but it plugs into our platform like any other critical application or platform in the data center to allow you to do workflow and workload automation from one spot for the enterprise in a secure and audited way.
Is it easy to see the schedule of the last week? Versioning of the schedule?
So the question was, can you see the history of the last week or the versioning? So absolutely, we have the ability to say we do built-in version control. So if a job changes once a week for the last 32 weeks because there's changes to the application, there's a setting that you would control that says how many prior versions of job definitions do I want to keep. And maybe I'm having an issue today and I need to revert back to the version from a week ago or a month ago or a year ago. As long as you've kept that many number of versions, literally in about 15 seconds you can bring back the version of the job from a week ago and make that become the current version again. So, this is just, I've talked about 10 of the things we do well. ControlEm, again, I'm in marketing. I've hit you up enough with how we dominate that market and what we do. We do that and about 1,000 other things that I haven't even described here. But version control is absolutely one of them.
Would I be able to design an UC workflow for that, or is it just the integration of one workflow into a huge one?
So great question, and I'm getting the time up. So let's have this be the last question. But really, we're down in the main hall. The last release. So we have a small, dedicated, but small team. It's about 4 developers that are dedicated to ControlEm for Hadoop. The release that we came out with just a few months ago added integration with Uzi. So up until that point, we basically were just saying replace Uzi with ControlEm, and that's still what you want to do. But as of a couple months ago, we had customers telling us, hey, we have 5,000 jobs in Uzi today. We're not just ready to flip the switch and move them all to ControlEm. As of 3 months ago now, Uzi is a supported job for us. So we can integrate with Uzi, even though absolutely the benefit is derived from replacing Uzi with ControlEm in your Hadoop environment and then using ControlEm for the rest of the environment. But yes, we do have that as an option now because we've got this team that's dedicated to trying to keep up with what our customers and the industry is saying. Here's what we need. Okay, so thank you again for coming. I hope you have a great another day and a half. Stop by the main pavilion, booth 401. It's the big one right when you walk in, a lot of orange stuff. Bring the book and Joe will sign it for you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for coming.